DC's got some great museums, but none where you can live out your wildest rock star dreams. Cleveland's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is where legends come alive. You can even jam out with their house band in their interactive musical experience, The Garage. And don't miss their incredible new SNL exhibit, featuring Will Ferrell's famous cowbell and the complete archive of every SNL musical performance ever aired. Check out the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to learn more about the music that connects us all. Find more info at rockhall.com/exhibitions/SNL-50-years-music. Today on CityCast DC. The DC budget still hasn't passed, but it's getting closer. The DC Council's latest budget pencils in more than $1 billion for the RFK Stadium deal and approves ranked choice voting. Plus, it rejects Bowser's proposed rollback of the I-82 tipped wage law for now. WAMU's Alex Koma has been following all the updates. He's here to get into what this means for the city. Today is Wednesday, July 16th. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. Alex, thank you so much for being here.
Well, it's great to be back.
So we know that over the weekend, there was this big blitz to change some of the language in the 2026 budget. I want to go through it step by step, starting with the Commander Stadium. Are they going to be getting funding via the budget or no?
Yeah, the $500 million or so attached to the stadium remains in the budget. But what's kind of complicated is that doesn't mean that the deal is approved. The council is sort of a show of good faith to the mayor, and the commanders has said, we're going to leave this money untouched, exactly with very few changes around the margins as the mayor originally proposed it. They are just taking a little bit longer to actually vote on standalone legislation that would approve the deal and let it move forward. Now, Chairman Phil Mendelson has kind of backtracked a little bit. At first, he said there might not be a vote on this until September. The council, like the rest of us, wants to go on vacation and take a recess in August. But now, because of the pressure from the mayor and the commanders, it is looking increasingly likely that we could very well have a vote sometime next month.
I know the commanders thing really involved a lot of back and forth. What kind of compromises were involved in getting us here?
Yeah, I mean, this budget has been an unpleasant one for pretty much everyone to put together. The district's chief financial officer said that the city was going to lose something like $1 billion in revenue over the last 3 years. And so that means that nobody's had an especially good time on this one. The mayor basically advanced her proposal, with the Commander Stadium being essentially the only really large, substantial new investment because so much of the rest of what she had to do was make cuts. She has been betting on attracting businesses back to the city through a variety of strategies, RFK being a prime example of them, viewing that as a way to spur development in that section of the city. But all of the rest of the budget has been her saying, we simply can't afford to do this any longer. The council coming back and saying, well, I think that we can make a few changes around the margins. I mean, that's essentially what they did is sort of tinkering on the edges, adding some money back in for certain programs that they favor. But look, I mean, this remains a budget that is going to cut Medicaid, cut health insurance for a tremendous number of people. It's, huge slashes to things like emergency rental assistance and housing vouchers, services for homeless families. But yes, there may well be a new football stadium. It's kind of hard for some people to square those two things, but that is where we are.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask, where is this money coming from?
Yeah, so for the football stadium, essentially it is money that is pulled almost entirely from a tax on large businesses that was originally levied to pay for another sports stadium, Nats Park. And that tax was supposed to sunset once the bonds on to build Nats Park, essentially the debt the city took on, was paid off. And that pretty much has happened. Within the next year or two, they'll finish that out. But sort of a little controversially, the mayor said, well, what if we keep charging that tax? Most businesses are eager to see the commanders come back and crucially, the business groups that lobby before their interests at the council are eager to see the commanders come back, and so they're okay with that arrangement. So it's not really new taxes. She gets to say that, that we have not imposed a new tax to do this, but there is an opportunity cost for all this stuff. There's hundreds of millions in spending to prepare the land that could just as easily have gone to school modernization or new parks or new roads, any of the other big construction projects the city manages. So it's not, we're not being need to pay extra so much as the city is forgoing the chance to do other things it might have with this money.
Yeah, I mean, you really said it. Less money for DC's most vulnerable and more money for sports stadiums. Do I have that right?
That's essentially it. I mean, it's the case that probably no matter what, whether they pursued RFK or not, given the financial circumstances they were in, they would need to at least think about these cuts if they were unwilling to raise revenue via new taxes, which they have said they are not willing to do, both the council and the mayor, with very few exceptions. So just given the size of, and I should say, the reason why the city's in this predicament is because of the cuts to the federal workforce. The layoffs, that the Trump administration has ordered have really had cascading effects on our economy that we have not yet felt the brunt of. And that's why you're seeing the district have to revise its revenue estimates downward. And when that happens, there's less money for a lot of things. And when you look at the city's budget, basically the two biggest areas of spending are education and human services. And pretty much no one wants to cut education. Certainly Mayor Muriel Bowser does not. And so, they shied away from doing that. And so that means the cuts fall on human services. And that means things like Medicaid, things like the Healthcare Alliance, which is a program for people who are sort of in that gap in between being able to qualify for Medicaid. They're not quite down enough on the income spectrum for Medicaid, but maybe they don't quite have enough money or have the right kind of job to get private insurance. So that means that, 27,000 people who are in this program who are not doing especially well, and crucially, who receive health insurance regardless of their immigration status. There are a lot of undocumented people in this program. About 27,000 of them are just going to lose their care. There's no way around it. The council hasn't finalized its budget yet. I mean, that happens at the end of July, but it's very much looking like, upwards of 40-some thousand, a little under 50,000 people are going to lose their health care.
I mean, I have my own opinions about this. I think that one of the things that makes DC a good place to live is the fact that there are a lot of robust social services. And it's a place where if folks, there are services for folks who need those kinds of things. And that's something that attracts me to a city like DC. And I understand that for people, a sports stadium, they might feel the same way about a sports stadium. But to me, these are things that make DC a city worth living in.
Yeah, and this is an argument that you see playing out at the council because the mayor has very explicitly framed her budget as a growth agenda. The whole idea being that, if the city's revenues are going to decline due to what the federal government is doing, the only way that the city can dig itself out of this hole is by attracting new residents, and that you do that with things like, tax incentives for businesses, tax cuts for businesses, cutting red tape. Essentially, it's not a stretch to call this trickle-down economics, and many people have done so because, the question that many critics of the mayor's budget are asking is exactly the one that you alluded to, Bridget, which is to say, well, what about the people who live here? I mean, it's not a thriving city if people can't afford to stay here. It might be nice to try and attract some additional residents who could pay taxes. But what about the people who are struggling to stay here, go to school here, and pay taxes here, build their lives here? Why shouldn't they just move to the suburbs if you're going to do things like cut their health insurance and not help them afford to rent an apartment in the city, that sort of thing. So I think that this is a very live debate playing out between the council and the mayor right now. And I think that minus more aggressive actions on the council's part to really reverse this dynamic, dynamic from a revenue standpoint, the budget may change slightly in the direction that we're talking about helping people who need it, but really isn't going to be a substantive change. The dynamic kind of remains the same.
Got CityCast set to auto-download? Now you're cooking with gas. Wait, cooking with gas is so last century. Not only is an all-electric home cleaner and healthier, but it can save energy and money too. Thanks to the DC SEU, or the DC Sustainable Energy Utility, it's easier and more affordable than ever to electrify. As in, any district resident can get up to $15,000 off upgrades. Income qualified folks, they can upgrade at no cost. Seriously. And the DC SEU has rebates for the good stuff: heat pumps that warm and cool efficiently, induction stoves that boil water faster than Donna Summer can say, well, hot stuff. Their team can help you update your electric panel, delivering the upgrades that make adding new appliances possible. But hey, the funding won't last. Visit dcseu.com/electric and bust a move on energy-efficient home electrification today.
Join the Library of Congress on July 24th for Ask the Ethicist, a live session with Kwame Anthony Appiah, 2024 recipient of the Kluge Prize and resident New York Times ethics columnist, who helps readers sort through life's sticky situations and moral dilemmas, from crypto and AI to lawn chemicals, pet names, using sick leave to slack off, and yes, politics. The Ethicist seems to have heard it all. In this special interactive event, explore real-world moral dilemmas and cast your vote on what you would do. Then, hear how one of today's most influential public philosophers thinks through the same questions. Thoughtful and engaging, the library invites you to reflect on everyday ethical questions in a way that's personal, relevant, and fun. That's Ask the Ethicist on July 24th at the Library of Congress. Get free tickets at loc.gov/live. Let's take a bit of a turn and talk about I-82, the initiative that would eliminate the tip minimum wage. It's been hard for me to keep up with what's going on with it. It was looking like on Sunday it was going to be shot down, but on Monday afternoon the council kind of threw a Hail Mary to save it for now. What exactly is going on here?
Yeah, you'd be forgiven for having a hard time keeping track of it because, I've been covering I-82 for a little under a decade at this point, and it's gone back and forth. This passed as a ballot initiative in 2018. The council repealed it. Then it passed again in 2022. Now we're talking about the council maybe repealing it again. That's what Mayor Muriel Bowser proposed, essentially, throwing the tip minimum wage back to what it was before all of this started, a little over, I think it's about $6 an hour. And, now it's currently at $10 an hour and has been steadily increasing thanks to Initiative 82. A full repeal of the initiative at this point, as the mayor preferred, looks unlikely. But what does look likely is that the council is going to do something to it. Last month, they voted to pause the wage increases. It was set to go up to $12 an hour on July 1st. And they said, whoa, let's take until at least October to hash all of this out. So we've sort of been in limbo since then. As you mentioned, Council Chair Phil Mendelson included what he termed a compromise measure in his budget. A couple other more moderate council members had been working on this and sort of brought it to him to put into the budget. And this was an unusual, solution they worked out. It would take the base wage for tipped workers to $8 an hour, but it would set a new super minimum wage. I'm using air quotes because that's a very unusual term, super minimum wage, of $20 an hour, meaning that if you're a tipped worker and you make in tips above a wage, past $20 an hour, great. You're fine. Your employer doesn't need to do anything. If you don't make $20 an hour, your employer makes up the difference between what you earned in tips and that $20 an hour rate. If that sounds complicated and kind of like a headache, it it definitely is. And a lot of council members agreed with you, and they voted that solution down at their first budget vote. They said, we want to take everything out of the budget entirely when it comes to I-82 until we can find some sort of additional compromise. And I think it's very likely that they'll do so. Basically, there are a few council members who just want to leave Initiative 82 untouched, let the wage increases proceed until the tipped minimum wage is phased out and there is just one minimum wage for all workers in the city. But there are several others who, having heard a bunch of restaurant owners and even some workers complain that this initiative wasn't working for them, it was leading to decreased tips and increasing wage costs for labor costs for restaurants. They said, we need something. And I think it is likely that they will advance some other compromise ahead of the council's second budget vote at the end of the month. It's just an open question what that looks like.
This might be a stupid question, but before I-82 passed, were employers required to make up the difference if their staff was not being paid minimum wage in the first place?
Yeah, that is absolutely the law in the district. But there is, of course, quite a large difference between it being the law and people following it, because the dynamic that a lot of workers would describe is one where, in particular, this would affect back of house staff, the people who are not the ones who are directly earning the tips. Maybe they would make tips as part of a pooled tip system, but these are not the servers that you would see out in front. And crucially, these are the workers who are most likely to not speak English as their first language, maybe be undocumented, essentially be sort of on the back foot when it comes to dealing with their employers. So yes, it is the case that employers are supposed to just make up that difference in their paycheck. They're not supposed to, have to do anything. But there's something called wage theft where employers don't do that. And that makes it sort of incumbent on the employees themselves to know the law, to scrutinize their paychecks and say, hey, no, this didn't quite line up the right way, and then have to make that argument either to their employers directly, which is a perilous situation, or, taking it out and asking for enforcement from someone like the DC Attorney General, who could sue to get this recovered. I mean, you can see how that system is supposed to work, but there are all sorts of, stumbling blocks. And this is why the supporters of I-82 just said, listen, set one wage for everybody, then we don't have to do any of this, and we don't have to, pretend like this system is working when a lot of people say that it is not.
Well, has the council given any indication for how a system like this might be enforced?
Yeah, I mean, every time the answer comes back and says, well, we'll just beef up enforcement from the city agencies that's supposed to monitor this, from the attorney general who is supposed to monitor this. And I mean, that's fine. That's all well and good. There should be more wage theft enforcement. It is, of course, a crime. But, that doesn't mean that playing whack-a-mole, trying individually to solve this problem or set some sort of example for employers is a more sustainable solution than simply leveling the playing field for everybody. So, there's always, and I guarantee if they pass some sort of I-82 compromise at the end of the year, there will be, sort of moves toward, well, we want to see more enforcement of wage theft since that is the primary concern for many I-82 proponents. You'll hear this rhetoric all the time. It's just, whether or not it happens is a very real question. They've been talking about more wage theft enforcement basically ever since they repealed I-82 the first time in 2018, and we still see it happening all the time.
Is there money for increased enforcement?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, normally they throw a few dollars here and there. It's just, it's impossible to root out absolutely every single instance of wage theft. I mean, the idea is that you would want robust enough enforcement so as to deter, the other, companies that are thinking about doing the same. And certainly both Attorney General Cara Racine, our old Attorney General, and Attorney General Brian Schwab, they've been aggressive about policing wage theft. I mean, I believe the Attorney General just had announced a case against several employers a few weeks ago. So it's not like it isn't happening. It's just, whether or not, are employers tuned into this? Do they see it as, worth it to keep up these practices on the off chance that maybe you get caught versus you could just be saving a lot of money right now by taking advantage of your workers? I'm skeptical.
So it's not really a problem of like there's no money to enforce it. It's more of like it's a complex problem to enforce and often feels like you're playing whack-a-mole to do it in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I mean, you can't unless the Department of Employment Services had an agency official standing over the shoulder of every single person setting payroll in the district, which they're not going to. Then, yeah, of course, things will slip through the cracks. So I think the argument of the Pro 82 people is simply, why should we be doing this in the first place? We can save a lot of time and just make sure everybody is paid a same flat minimum wage. They've been giving restaurants years to adjust to this change. Many of them have. Only some of them have not. And those are the ones who are lobbying most aggressively to get rid of this initiative.
Well, finally, Alex, let's get to I-83, which is the initiative that kickstarted DC toward ranked choice voting. One of the big caveats about this was the council was going to need to fund it to make it happen. So is this money, is this going to get funded?
Yeah, the answer is mostly. So Initiative 83 was going to reform our local elections, and it would do two things. It would add ranked choice voting, where you would be able to rank your candidates in order of preference instead of just picking one. And then it would open party primaries to independent voters. This was the more controversial piece among the two. A lot of Democrats support the idea of ranked choice voting, but they're a little more nervous about, potentially allowing Republicans or right-leaning independents to vote in their primaries. So that part didn't get funded. The council did, however, find a little over $500,000 to fund the ranked choice voting element. This would be a very big deal because the council is saying that with this money, that ranked choice voting would be able to be implemented in time for the June 2026 primaries, when the mayor, the council chair, the attorney general, and several council seats will all be on the ballot. This would be a huge change for local elections. I mean, we just saw how it changed the New York mayoral primary, where you had candidates cross-endorsing each other in an attempt to beat, Andrew Cuomo, the perceived front runner at the time. You had more positive campaigning where the candidates were refusing to attack each other. I think it really showed the possibilities of what a ranked choice voting election can be. And it really would change the calculus in, DC when there's already talk about who's going to run for mayor. If multiple candidates run for mayor, does it, lessen the chance of any candidate opposed to Bowser beating Bowser, who is expected to run for a fourth term? So this is a potentially seismic move. There's no guarantee that A, this funding survives a second vote, which it's got to do at the end of the month, and then B, that there aren't additional procedural hurdles thrown up in between now and June 2026. Maybe the Board of Elections says we can't manage this change in time. Maybe the council members who are opposed to this find ways to intervene and delay this until a lower stakes election in 2028. There's a long way to go. But if this all takes effect for 2026, it would be a very, very big deal.
Who voted for and who voted against this?
Yeah, it was definitely a sort of a who's who. Nobody was really shifting their positions here. Much of the council has been sort of cautiously supportive of I-83, I would say. And so you saw that play out. It was an 8-4 vote. The four dissenters are four of the strongest voices who have spoken against it. Chairman Phil Mendelson, who has long critiqued this. I mean, he's got a lot of process problems with the way the initiative was passed, among other things. And then some of the other people, in particular, you look at large council member Anita Bonds and Ward 7 council member Wendell Felder. These are two people who won their races in multi-candidate fields with a very small, not even a plurality of the votes in Felder's case. I think he won with a little over 20%. These are the types of candidates who might not well win in a ranked choice race going forward. Anita Bonds in particular, the last several election cycles, people have pointed exactly to her types of races to say, look, she's winning because she's been around in city politics for about 50 years. She's got a ton of name recognition. She's winning narrowly in multi-candidate fields, but you could imagine a world where if there's ranked choice, now you're seeing it's not just the first past the post person, it's the person who can attract the most second choice and third choice votes, as well as the first choice votes. And someone like Anita Bonds, who doesn't really campaign outside of showing up to a few senior centers and on Zoom forums. I mean, that's the kind of candidate who could be vulnerable in a race like this. And it makes a lot of sense, too, that she is a longtime organizer and executive with the DC Democratic Party, which has been fighting this initiative tooth and nail. They currently have a court challenge to it pending. So it's sort of a, no great surprises on this particular vote with who ends up supportive and who ends up opposed.
You mentioned that the second component of this was letting independents vote in primaries. It sounds like that is not going to happen. Is it dead in the water?
Yeah, I think you could certainly see it happen at some point. Some council members said during the vote that they were wanting to consider it just because, the whole initiative passed. Voters knew what was in the initiative when they passed it, and they passed it overwhelmingly. So I think that you could still see this happening at some point. But, it's definitely the piece that makes people more uneasy. I think that is probably a little, I've long maintained that I think that this is a little oversold. I think that, right now, if you want to participate in the Democratic primary, which all of us in DC know, that's pretty much the only race that matters, with very few exceptions. I mean, there's an overwhelming majority of Democrats in the city. So if you want to say in who is running the city, you've got to vote in the primary. And so, you got to register as a Democrat if you want to do that. And I think a lot of people know that, whether they are Republicans or simply very, left or right-leaning Democrats. I think that a party that can contain, both Democratic Socialist aligned candidates and candidates aligned with, the tough on crime, school choice, these traditionally more, conservative, values, they're all in the Democratic Party right now. So I really don't think that it's going to make as big a difference as people think. It will really just open up things for the people who have, despite knowing all this, still chosen to register as independents or with other parties. I think it would probably just increase participation among the margins, but I don't think you're going to see a bunch of Trump voters storming in to change the outcomes of Democratic primaries. But that being said, it's a tougher sell to loyal, hardcore Democrats. And so, maybe it happens eventually, but it's certainly not going to happen in time for 2026, given the way that we're headed.
So read the tea leaves for us here a little bit, Alex. Is this budget with all of these new amendments going to pass? And if so, when?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to pass. There's no doubt. Despite all of the council's criticisms of all of the various policies and cuts that the mayor included in it, there's really only so much that they can do unless they want to find more money to make those changes. I think that is going to be the one thing that kind of changes, if anything. You've had some council members raise the idea of raising taxes moving forward. Ward 5 council member Zachary Parker it has already circulated a proposal to add a capital gains tax surcharge that is essentially on, people who are selling, off a bunch of stocks, things like that. And this would only affect transactions over $350,000 and up. So we're talking about people who theoretically have the money to give. And he is billing this as a way to restore some of the cuts that we discussed to things like healthcare, to things like the child tax credit that the city recently has started offering for parents of young kids. So I think it's an open question whether that will pass. Other council members have floated other ideas, maybe an additional wealth tax, maybe a tax on high-value homes. I'm not sure those have the momentum to succeed. So there will be more debate on this at the end of the month. July 28th is the second and final vote on all this. That's the deadline. Any changes that happen to this have to happen by then. So expect to see a little more lobbying, a little more scrambling, for some of these proposals. Will it substantially change? Probably not, and we'll have a budget by the end of the month.
Are there other tweaks that you're looking at as we head toward the council's August recess?
Yeah, I would say, those tax cuts or tax hikes are one of the biggest. And whether they succeed or not will really inform how much the rest of the budget changes. I mean, just during the first budget vote, you had council members pointing out, hey, we're about to kick off, like 40,000+ people off of healthcare, and we're not really doing anything about it. Or we're not adding virtually any new housing vouchers that help people who are living on the streets move into homes. These are things that the council would very much like to fund and just currently does not have the money to do so. So they're complaining about it. They're pointing out the problem. But the question is whether they're going to actually follow through and do anything about it. So I could imagine the capital gains tax passing because, it really truly only affects, the wealthiest people in the district. But there's a contingent on the council that is persistently opposed to taxes on the wealthy. They fear that it will push them to move out of the city, even though we have a great deal of economic research that says that doesn't happen. People want to live in places like DC. And so, I think that that's kind of the big remaining shoe yet to drop. And in addition to I-82, which we already discussed, somebody's going to come up with a compromise proposal on this. Kenya McDuffie has already been circulating a solution that would simply freeze the tip minimum wage where it is at $10 an hour with no additional increases. I don't know that has the support to move forward just yet, but I could imagine something that is designed to be, sort of a meeting in the middle of raising the tipped wage from where it was, but not having it increase all the way up to meet the full minimum wage. I think that something like that could very possibly come together between now and the end of July. We'll just have to see.
Well, Alex, thank you for keeping an eye on all of it, and thanks so much for being here.
Oh, it was great. Thanks for having me.
Before we go, I want to give a big thank you to our newest CityCast DC neighbors, Aaron C. and Libby R. Thank you for joining. That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Talk to you then.